So again, really great panelists today. So I would love to start it off first with a quick round of introduction. So I would like to give every one of you a quick hot minutes to introduce yourself and also the company in maximum 30, 40 seconds. Max, if you want to kick it off.
Hi, everyone. I'm Max from Data Machine Intelligence. We are a Munich-based startup. And as you can imagine, with all these drones which will be flying in the future, they cannot be all controlled by individual humans. Instead, they need to be automated and not just a single platform, but they are whole missions as a system of systems. So we address this automation by providing AI-based modules, by providing simulation infrastructure, advanced human-machine interfaces, meaning providing explainability to operators, and finally putting everything into a certifiable flow for the aviation industry that even until the highest levels of criticality, we can support these workflows.
Hello, Lucas Marchesini. I am an aeronautical engineer. I worked in aviation, motorsport, and high-tech environments. And I'm the CEO of Manta Aircraft. In Manta, we do the development of a hybrid electric VTOL, VSTOL actually, and a bit closer. Okay, and we address the pain point of regional transportation. So it's middle and long range transportation. So if you want to fly to some 100 kilometers with an eVTOL, then this is a solution that we are offering.
So you met me earlier, but Paul Pereira from Fluxart. I've been 34 years in aviation, and I'm now trying to decarbonize by using a superconducting motor, which is effectively 75% lighter weight than any copper motor, traditional motor today. And Fluxart is here because we believe that there is a chance to get to net zero, but in fact true zero, taking out non-CO2 effects of flying. And we believe we can do that in relatively short order with short-haul aircraft, potentially at single aisle, 120 to 150 seat range, and we can do that within a decade.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sebastian Seemann, representing Veridian. Thank you, Start Me Up team, for relating my person so closely to the company that you put my last name as Veridian, which actually is an honor.
On purpose.
Veridian is a Munich-based startup company that is developing a fully electric regional airplane. It is battery electric airplane, fully electric, no other source of energy required. We are a startup of 15 months of history for now and are going to not only develop but also certify and mass produce this aircraft for regional air mobility of a very decentralized travel market in the future.
Thanks. So my name is Benoît Ferrand. Hi, everyone. So I'm replacing Thibaut, a bit late notice, sorry for that. So I'm one of the 4 co-founders and CTO at Ascendance. So at Ascendance, we are developing technologies to decarbonize aviation. So we have 2 lines of products. The first one is a hybrid electric VTOL, targeting passenger transportation on a 400-kilometer range and proposing a more efficient alternative to helicopters. And the second one is the hybrid propulsion system we're developing through that eVTOL. We are selling that also to other aircraft manufacturers. So we just announced a partnership with Daher to hybridize their fleet on a 10-seater class. So this is really our vision, and I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. So thanks everyone for the intro. And as you see in the audience here, there is an interesting combination of both system integrators as well as also technology brick providers or suppliers to this future, or to enable the future air mobility in the next few years. So I would like to kick off the panel discussion now to get a little bit of an understanding sort of what is your vision for the years from 2030, specifically 2050. I mean, not in the next 7 years or so, but really a far-fetched look out. How can air mobility play a role in solving, I would say, humanity's largest problems? So maybe kicking it off first with the system providers. Maybe Sebastian, if you want to kick it off with a quick sort of taste of how your vision for that time period looks like.
Thank you very much for being able to make the start. We are actually even an OEM. So for part of the scope, we might be a system provider or developer ourselves, but not everything will be vertically integrated. So we see clearly the future such that in terms of how we travel in the air, there has to be a change in how we deal with resources. It's not only about emissions. It's also not only about using how much hydrocarbons we use. It's really about how much energy we use overall. And we believe that the change that you just mentioned, 2030 to 2050, to be able to provide a solution and provide air travel that's a little bit better and making really a contribution, that we know from aviation industry has to prepare right now. Nothing that goes quick. The topics in aviation last a lot longer, especially certification topics last a lot longer than we know it from other industry branches. And so Veridian deeply believes in having to provide a solution for mobility that is based on technology that you can have today. So it's not something that we can have a lot of time in developing, betting on technology, betting on how we are going to produce green energy in the future. But the product that we develop is the technology that we have available right now. And this is what we do. We built a full electric airplane based on battery technology that we have today, solving a few problems in terms of battery integration, in terms of propulsion system. But apart from that, it's a conventional airplane.
Thanks, Sebastian. And maybe sticking with the OEMs for a second, if you want, Lucas, to give us a little bit of a vision from your perspective.
Well, I think we should start thinking about what the customer wants. And in the future, we are going toward a future where people are less prone to own the vehicle and use a service. And since they want a service, they want to go from point A to point B, like with an app, and automatically or transparently for the user, they have to find a way to move from point A to point B. And they want a point-to-point transportation. So I think that the boundaries that are today existing for air transportation, which are one of them is, for example, the airports. Airplanes have to go to airports, and airports take space, and in densely populated areas there cannot be. It's very difficult. So there is the need to have these vehicles landing and taking off vertically. This is one part. But obviously, the whole system has to be integrated with the ground transportation, with the last mile transportation. So I think it's important to think from the user's perspective to understand what is the need that we'll have. And people will be quite agnostic about the mean of transportation, I think. They want a service, and it must be integrated. So what we are developing today has to be seen in an optic of being integrated with the other transportation systems, which are ground transportation systems as well. So to me, it's important that air transportation is capable to take off and land vertically, because this allows point-to-point transportation. And there is the need, again, to be integrated with the rest. So I think it's really, we should start from the user's point of view and then develop the technology. Otherwise, we might risk of developing something that is not accepted so much.
Interesting to hear the point of acceptance. I think obviously that's a very important one. Finalizing the OEM round here with Ascendance, what is your perspective on that, or specifically what do you want to add to the visions that already have been painted out?
Yes, sure. So first, I fully agree with the multimodal approach you were describing, and also the fact that we should not only focus on decarbonizing the energy, but also making aircrafts, airplanes, rotorcrafts, VTOL more efficient, also to reduce the energy consumption. So, I mean, our vision for 2050 is for sure less carbonized aviation. Our vision is to have hydrogen aircrafts by this timeline, but today we don't see that technology mature enough. So we're taking our role and our responsibility to develop this VTOL with a an entry into service by 2027, and then we think a step-by-step approach is necessary to develop all these technologies, and the certification, I think we will come back to that later, from let's say smaller range, smaller payload aircrafts, but really making and having commercial use cases, testing the technologies and the attractivity, and then scale up on bigger aircrafts, which is also the core thing to address by 2050.
Thanks for that. I think that the last point is really interesting to see as well, and maybe that's also good to segue to you, Paul, from a propulsion perspective.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking, right, decarbonizing by 2050. We have to start now. I totally agree with that, right? I'm looking at the mixed modalities and thinking, absolutely, there's a need to look at decarbonizing things that are obviously unable to be decarbonized by another means. Electrification helps us a long way on the ground. In the air, there's a lot of challenges taking batteries to the sky. We have to solve those because it is the most efficient way to do it. But at the scale that we need to decarbonize aviation, what we currently have in a 10-seat or a 20-seat market makes a pinprick on the savings we need by 2050. And increasing the number of eVTOLs in the sky, I don't know how many aircraft that's really replacing that produce carbon today. So my question would be, how do we scale these great technologies from eVTOLs to the larger aircraft? And that's what I think we really need to be focused on. So I want every eVTOL company to be successful, and then we need to be able to go far further to get to single-aisle aircraft. 66% of all CO2 comes from the single-aisle aircraft that many of us travel around Europe on. And so my challenge to everybody here is let's go faster, but let's not forget the end goal. And 2050 isn't far away in aviation terms. I think Thomas made the point. It's really important that we don't slow down. If anything, we're going far too slowly as an industry. There are ways that we can go faster, but it means a different collaboration model than we've been working before. So, if hydrogen has some challenges, other industries have solved those. So I work with the energy sector. Liquefied hydrogen is used in many industries today. It's actually not so difficult to transport. It isn't as unsafe as people sometimes think in aviation. Regulatory problems that we will face could have been solved in those industries. So I think we need to look at the whole problem space from a customer angle, but we need to look at it from the world's angle. And the world's problem is carbon, and we need to tackle 66% of that, not 1%.
Thanks, Paul, for that. I think that environmental impact is really something that if we look into these 30, 40 years ahead, this is really something where it's going to make a large difference. And finally, on your end, Max, I would love to hear also from your side, especially if you're focusing on the entire part of autonomous systems, making sure that we can at one point provide even a further integration of these systems with autonomous and pilotless systems, but also what is really the impact that you foresee, maybe even on the shorter term, but specifically in this time frame, 2030 to 2050.
So also to start with my vision, I think every one of you understood the pain of ground-based transportation trying to come to Paris Air Show. So my vision of urban air mobility is something that's quite accessible to everyone and not just super rich people as helicopters are today. So that's one central motivation we take. So in consequence, we need to be able to reduce operational cost of these systems in order to make them accessible. And today, pilots are a key cost driver. They require very expensive education, regular training due to the complexity of such systems and their regulations, as well as the availability of them, both being cost drivers. So by gradually increasing automation, we can reduce the skill level pilots need in order to operate these vehicles, hence increasing availability of pilots and therefore reducing costs. So our motivation of automating these vehicles is basically about making them accessible to a wider group of people. And for this, AI and autonomy is very crucial.
Thanks, Max, for that. And I would love to stick for a second with the topic, Paul, that you introduced, which is right. How can we scale this to a larger market? I mean, all of you, especially on the OEM side, right? You're trying to focus on a specific market as of now. But what do you see the impact of future mobility in that larger time frame to be like in terms of size of the aircraft, and specifically what would be also your plans of how to scale to larger or smaller size depending on the visions that you had? Maybe Luca, if you want to start with you.
Well, I think today we have one problem with this type of aircraft, which is the energy density that we can carry on board. And this is a major aspect. If we want to scale up the aircraft, we cannot just multiply a small aircraft, the dimensions by a certain number. Otherwise, the 747 would be a very big Cessna 172, and it's not. So it's not like that. So we have to tackle this problem. I see as a main problem. Energy density. Today, batteries are not there to allow all the emissions that aviation offers. So we cannot decarbonize today aviation until we have an alternative to liquid fuels, which have a very high energy density. So I see that to scale up, we have to solve this problem. Today, I think the only way we have to, until we get other sources of energy which are dense enough, batteries with high energy density, is the hybrid technology. Hybrid technology is going to be applied and actually is tested today on larger airplanes. We have mid-size airplanes for 30 people or 50 passengers, which are testing now hybrid technology, hybrid propulsion system. So I think this is one key aspect for scaling up. And then there are all the other logistics and everything. But I just focus on this, then maybe somebody else can tackle the other.
Can I just, I mean, I think hybridization is key. I mean, electric takes us so far. Gas turbines are super efficient, really, really amazing when they've got kerosene in them. Put hydrogen in them, and they can be super efficient, but they produce NOx, because hydrogen, when it's burnt, basically increases the temperature of combustion. As you increase the temperature of combustion, you produce more NOx. And that's the challenge that we have with combustion. So when we go to hybridization, one of the big things we need to see is the scaling of an alternative. Fuel cells is a really good option, particularly with hydrogen. It could be with ammonia. I've tested and tried ammonia. I don't think that's going to work. But a liquid fuel in the form of liquid hydrogen gets there. And it has been proven by a number of studies that have been done. Most recently, I was involved in one in the UK called the ATI's Fly Zero, where they believe even a 6,000 nautical mile flight is possible by liquid hydrogen. And they think that the mid-sized aircraft could be 200 to 250 seats. So when we start thinking about moving ourselves away from carbon, I think we need to take some really big leaps of technology. But all the technology bricks you talked about are being worked on. And I've been around this show for 4 days now, and I've seen duplicative technologies that are all heading in the same direction, and the people aren't talking to each other because it's commercial, it's proprietary. If we really want to unlock the capability and accelerate, we need to do something different commercially. And I've been talking about my experiences of trying to do this in rapid timescales during the COVID. We had to, in the UK, build our own supply chain in a regulated market, which would normally take 10 years to build a ventilator. We did it in 5 weeks. So could we say climate change is a bigger problem than COVID, which it is, it will kill more people. So why don't we collectively come together in a different collaborative model and accelerate all the technologies that are greatly on display? Forget some of the pains that we've been through and take some of the advantages that we could have of collaborating differently.
First of all, I would like to very much agree with my neighbor speakers on the fact that aviation as a whole can never be fully electric. So large airplanes, and people want to fly and will fly large airplanes in the future, are going to stay highly sensitive on the energy density to propel them. And the highest energy density we can find in nature are hydrocarbons, and will remain hydrocarbons forever. So what does it lead to? It leads to, for the first time in the history of aviation, into a diversification of the industry when it comes to the primary energy sources. Because now there is a difference in timing, how we can become more sustainable. And the way we can become more sustainable right now, immediately, is electric. The way we can become more scaled, in a scaled manner, sustainable in the future is going to be a mix. And you asked the question about how do we scale in these sectors. And I think one important thing that we have to underline, especially for the short haul market, is that the people actually want to travel. They do not necessarily want to travel through the air or on the ground. They just want to get from A to B. I think everyone would subscribe to that. And we have numbers for that. So if we take Germany, for example, the country where our company is based, in the range of 500 to 600 kilometers, there are each year 1.4 billion people traveling. But it's not people on the planes. 80% of them travel in the car. And there are reasons for that. First, infrastructure is a reason, cost is a reason, comfort is a reason. So when we talk about scalability, it's about what mode of transport do we actually offer to the passengers that, I agree with you, can be multimodal, that is the most sustainable, the less costly, because cost always is going to be the driver for the companies and for the private persons, and that is going to be the most energy efficient.
Thanks. Yeah, lots of things have already been said and rich statements on that. So I will try to complement just by the fact that from a system architecture point of view or from a software architecture point of view, there are lots of things that we can develop today that are already applicable for tomorrow. For example, in the certification framework, we're developing our eVTOL or hybrid VTOL, sorry. We are already targeting resilience to single failure, 10-9 probability of catastrophic events, etc. And this is already a step towards Part 25 commercial aviation. The second thing is, so I would just add the infrastructure aspect. So I think everyone agrees around the table that hydrogen, for example, will be key for the 2050 aviation. And what is really necessary also is that all the infrastructure is developed also in parallel to connect all the hubs we will have to we will have to travel between. So this is a key aspect also from a production chain, from a distribution network, etc., etc.
Thanks. And I think if I summarize a little bit now what the elements that have been mentioned so far, it's definitely energy, right? This is one of the most pressing issues. Then I think the topic of multimodality, to understand sort of, what is the actual problem that we're solving. And then, as you also mentioned, the end, the part of infrastructure. But what I would really love to hear, and I think this is also, especially in the last few months, been a topic that has been on the news nonstop, is also how can the software side, to use the buzzword artificial intelligence side, sort of support the scalability of that. And Max, I think you're definitely a good person to talk about that. So what are your thoughts for on the topic of scalability per se, how artificial intelligence can play a role?
So as mentioned before, AI and automation will clearly play a key role in scaling these things by reducing costs, by introducing flexibility. But for me, if we think about software, and especially AI-based software in critical systems, it's a bit like what you mentioned about infrastructure. It takes time to build it up. So right now we see quite a strong focus of the urban mobility industry on establishing the first flying platforms. And they're super focused on this, which is super good. But they will quite quickly come to the point where they realize there's a need for automation, but then only starting then to work on the AI infrastructure, on the regulatory infrastructure which you need, is too late. So we as a company are looking into this quite early now with other lead figures in the industry to kind of build up the infrastructure that is needed to develop safe AI technology, to build acceptance for AI technology. And then once the platform or OEM companies are ready to leverage autonomy and AI in their systems, we want to make sure we have a proven solution in place that can be used and also certified according to authorities.
Thanks, Max, for that. And I think I would love to hear also the rest of the panel here a little bit react to that. So what do you feel like about what Max just mentioned, and how, what are your plans specifically to implement that?
So at Fluxart, we've been working to leverage generative AI into the design tools, the development tools. In fact, just the other day, we fed OpenAI, as an example, with Torrenbeek, one of the world's leading trade study material. We fed it with other data that we provided on hydrogen aircraft and redefined with a very clear validation hydrogen aviation's possibilities to decarbonize. And in fact, it was validated by 7 scientists after that event. So we didn't just believe the AI, we took it to scientists to double check what the outcomes were. And we did a life cycle assessment from green electrons to power. And we worked out that hydrogen, green hydrogen from renewables, taking all of the losses that are associated with electrolysis and the fuel cell, is still 4 times better than kerosene. And in terms of the cost, we worked out the cost and direct operating costs was only 6% lower than today's cost of kerosene. But 6% is about what most airlines make as a margin. So we then double-checked this and thought, well, this can't be right. So we're looking at using generative AI. It took 2 hours to do that study for us and come out with that result. It took 3 weeks for those scientists to do their study. So if we start to believe that things can shrink from 7 weeks to 2 hours, and in studies like that, what other trades could we do? What other capabilities? So we're looking at now doing thermal modeling with aerodynamics using generative AI. So lots of opportunities.
Thank you for the question. Very, very interesting questions. We also think about that in our company, Veridian. I have to try and not disappoint you on how quickly AI may enter into the aviation industry. What I see as a potential entry point clearly is the development, the design activities, as Paul pointed it out as well. Maybe mainly as a first start for the multidisciplinary optimization activities in the teams. So to do things quicker, to do things more precise with the support of AI than they are doing it today, very often partially manually. And as well, of course, on the business side, on the market analysis, on the cost modeling, where I would be personally a little bit more skeptical is the certification and especially the operational part. Aviation industry, I think everyone agrees, is quite a conservative industry for very good reasons. We take our time, we focus on safety. The AI, from my personal experience, topic is every day producing so many fascinating news. For example, some people saying, "Hey, you see, the AI has written my CV for my next job application. I had to do nothing." And on the other side, the HR department says, "Hey, our AI script is reading the CVs and evaluating the CVs, so no one is doing anything anymore." Generating, perfect photographs, as we see it now on LinkedIn, for example. So let me be a little bit in this round the more conservative player from the OEM perspective, welcoming technology, but staying realistic when it comes to the speed of implementing it into something which has to stay to some extent conventional.
Thanks.
Yeah, fully agreed. But I think AI could have a role, a short-term role in non-critical functions. If we think about like trajectory optimization or this kind of thing, it does not affect the safety of flight, but it can already improve the efficiency of the transportation. There is a topic also on automation. So I think we have to remember that the human factor plays a key role, like maybe 80% of the accidents. So I think AI is a difficult topic, but it's important to address it from now because it progresses very, very fast, and it can help a lot, especially on hybrid VTOLs. For example, not talking about full autonomy, even reducing the amount of workload of increasing the level of assistance of the pilot can reduce the qualification which is needed for piloting this kind of aircraft. And that reduces a lot the pilot costs, improve the availability of pilots that can pilot our aircraft, etc. So there are multiple topics that can be handled by that.
Luca, if you want to say a few thoughts there.
Well, I agree mostly with everyone here. So I would recap saying that We can see the aviation in 3 different areas for AI. One is obviously design, and here it's clear we see the advantage in the design. But then we have operation and maintenance. And as you were saying, maintenance is not critical in a certain way, but it's not critical. So there we can use a lot AI, I think. AI will enter there. I see this as a first place, together with the optimization of routes, for example, or which anyway, these are tasks that are afterwards controlled by a human. So AI can help, but the human has to be at the final gate to allow the decision. So I think we are not there to allow the AI to take decisions. So they are a good, let's say, advisors, and this could be the first way. For about certification, I think it will take many years until we accept AI to do anything, or taking the responsibility of passengers and people.
Can I just add one final thought?
Sure,
on
yeah,
this?
go ahead.
There's a way to speed up things like Navier-Stokes CFD by using the capability of generative AI, and that can be seen over in the ATI stand, a little company called Beyond Math, and they've validated this with Formula One companies. They can do what a Cray computer over 40 hours does in 2 minutes. So there's a lot of speed development, I think, that can happen, which is important, has been validated. Secondly, I do agree on safety, but to discover new materials, which we need for heat exchangers in our environment, for new battery formulations, there's a lot of AI being used in the same way as in the drugs and pharmaceutical industry to discover new materials, discover new drugs. That is already happening. Yes, you have to go through the same regulatory pathways, but it speeds up a large part of the non-discovery as well of the wrong things. So I think we will get there faster. We have to be wide open to the safety issues, but I think inevitably we have to embrace it. We can't just deny it.
I really like the discussion so far, and I think before giving now the word to Max as the expert in that field to react on a few of these topics, quickly summarizing, I think what you're saying, there's I think 3 or 4 different sub-elements where artificial intelligence can play a very large role, and that is general automation of operations, design, and also, I would say, the maintenance part of it. So Max, from your perspective, hearing the discussion now, what would be your first thoughts on that? And would you like to challenge a few of them? Do you agree with them? What's your take?
So yes, it works. In most of the applications you mentioned, I also have seen very good results of AI. Some of them I worked myself. At the same time, I want to point out we shouldn't be too afraid of using AI in critical systems too, because EASA as certification authority is pushing really, really hard over the past few years in paving a way for certifying AI technology. There are standardization working groups with Airbus, Thales, all the big companies, small companies, tooling companies, who are currently paving the way for a new standard. This standard will be available next year. And so for lower criticality levels, so please no delay at the moment, yes, you can use it. You will be able to use it. However, and this is the point you mentioned, the operational interface towards the human is a root cause for aircraft failure. And here even EASA says that they're quite limited in the guidance they can give today. But this is something which we also identify as a company, that this is an absolute crucial aspect in providing trustworthy and safe AI. So we're really focusing on building new ways of interfaces which can provide multi-layers of explanations for complex recommendations that an AI system gives to the humans. So I think we are on a very good track, especially in Europe, where EASA, in contrast to FAA, is really progressive in this topic and pushing this forward. So don't be afraid to use AI, even critical functions.
Thanks, Max. Unless one of you wants to react to that, but I think where the discussion is moving now, I think, is that we're outlining a lot of sort of the enabling factors that get us there to the point of making the visions that we outlined earlier reality by 2030 or beyond that. And if we summarize it again, right, it's one, I think an important factor is commercial collaboration. So there's a lot of technologies out there, but how can we all bring them together and ensure that there is a, sort of a joint voice and the overall acceleration of the process. Energy, obviously a very, very large factor, multimodality, artificial intelligence, the entire infrastructure part. But before diving in maybe into the, I would say the challenges that we have in terms of getting that vision a reality, is there anything else that you would like to add from your perspective as an enabling factor? And if not, we can dive into the challenges.
I'm just going to echo things said earlier. So whichever solution we look at, we need green renewable electricity. Whether it be hydrogen, for green hydrogen, for batteries. There's just not enough green electricity that the world has today. So we need to accelerate the power development and also power transmission. And one of the interesting things about what we're doing at Fluxart using superconducting is power transmission can be much more effective using superconducting. So not that it's our business, but there are many technologies that could move electrons better through the system. And we need those because airports will need infrastructure for charging batteries. Current cables aren't going to deliver enough power to the forecourts of even our own cars, yeah? We need to have airports that are probably 10 times bigger on power demand. They're not going to have a nuclear power station beside them. So we need energy storage. It's going to be absolutely critical. Batteries themselves have a number of challenges we haven't talked about. I'd like to add, I know some of the team here are working on it, but recycling of batteries for aviation for other purposes is going to be critical because the carbon content in batteries is significant. When you make a battery, you have a lot of energy consumption to make the battery. And until you've used it to about 200,000 kilometers in a car, probably about 6 weeks in an aircraft, which is when you're going to then delete those batteries and replace them with something else. And you're going to have a stack of batteries at every airport that are going to be unused. So maybe those batteries, when they're unused, become the battery storage system for the airport. So we need to think about a circular economy in energy consumption, energy usage, energy storage.
I'm not sure if this is already the answer to one of the challenges you wanted to discuss about, but it's like so much tempting what you said to just respond to that. I fully agree with you, Paul, that that especially for the batteries, you need to have circular economy. You need to have like circular value chain for the production of the batteries, the life of the batteries, and by life I even means several lives, until they eventually get recycled. I mean, it couldn't have been a better introduction. Yesterday, we have announced from Viridian a cooperation with the German battery supplier Custom Cells, as well with the recycling company Silib, to address this very specifically, because all these things have logical solutions available when it comes to the second life of the batteries, when they're no longer aviation grade, and maybe their state of life has reduced, so they are no longer economically usable in the aircraft. They can stay on the ground. They can stay in it. They can be an energy buffer, like the ones coming out of the cars at the airports. And after that second life, they might even have a third life somewhere else, where you have lower requirements until you eventually recycle them and get the valuable raw materials again out of them. I fully agree with that.
Any other reactions to that? Because I think what we also have been mainly talking about now, right, is in terms of enabling factors and in terms of also challenges that has been outlined now, really from a technology perspective. But what about the need? What about the societal perspective of that? And I think that's also very much part of if you look at the vision that you guys portrayed and the projections that we see from well-renowned consultancies in terms of the amount and figures that are being thrown around for air mobility in that sector, I think this needs to play a very, very large role in that one as well. So maybe kicking it off on that side first here, any thoughts also on if there's any additional technology challenge that you see, but also a focus on the society and overall need and problem that we're solving as the industry?
Well, I think technology wise, we have many hurdles. So we are not lacking of challenges in this. Batteries, but also the rest. I think we have two aspects here. One is regulation, certification, regulation, and all this, and the other is acceptance. But I would expand the topic of acceptance also to information of providing proper information and the customers, let's say, to be aware of the systems that there are for transportation, the risks, and so on and so forth. Why I'm saying this? Because I see that sometimes we read in these social media some strange campaigns which demonize something without any reason, and this is due to ignorance mainly. So it might well happen that somebody starts saying something bad about urban air mobility, advanced air mobility, or whatever. I think we need to transfer the knowledge that we are building also to the rest of the society, to let them judge or understand what is going to come and how they will be served by this technology, and which are the risks, because it's bad to say, but we will have accidents for this because it's undeniable. And we have to prepare the people to accept these accidents, because otherwise there will be wild reactions at a certain point, and this can be, obviously will be detrimental to the development of the technology. So I think a communication that this industry has to make is toward the everyday person who will use the technology and explain how his life can change, and also the risks that he will face.
I fully agree on your point, and I think there's a good reference example. Think about Tesla cars. They went to the market, I would say, from aerospace perspective, as fairly immature products, which caused quite a bunch of crashes and so on, lethal crashes. So why are people not getting upset with Tesla cars? I agree, there's a high risk. They would get upset with urban air mobility, but I think the key aspect here is about urban air mobility needs to be inclusive as Tesla cars. It needs to be accessible to everyone, because if everyone's having a benefit of it, they are more likely to be stoked about the products becoming more lifestyle thing, and acceptance, even in the case of accidents, may be increased.
I think the point's been made about acceptance is an interesting, and you started with customers, right? So what does the customer want? And I look to the generation, I have kids aged from 24 down to 4, and I have 5 of them. None of them want to learn to drive. None of them say they want to jump into a helicopter today. They, in fact, question me as to how did I get to Paris. In fact, I drove because I had 3 people. It was cheaper on CO2 to come in the car. So, you know, we're looking at a different generation that's coming up. And I don't know socially they accept our legacy of burning carbon. And I think they're going to get very angry when they get told, when they get in the plane, they're going to pay for the costs that we have incurred by not solving the problem. And I think it's going to happen in days, not in weeks. And I think there'll be more anger when we put the price of tickets up, because fuel prices are going to increase, and they will. Sustainable aviation fuels will be today 4 times more expensive. So we want to get a blend of 7% by the end of this decade. That means we're probably going to have to put the fares up bit by bit, boiling the frog, I call it. But if we don't find solutions technically, people won't fly. And so prediction, and I know Boeing has it, that we're 22,000 flights in the sky today. By 2050, 45,000, double the number. I don't believe it. We have to solve some of these technology challenges now, otherwise people aren't going to fly or can not afford to fly. So my real mission here is to say acceptance is not there for aviation now, and it's going to only get worse. So we have to work on everything that we've talked about, and we have to do it at lightning speed.
So Paul, maybe let me ask a quick follow-up question on that, to say, if you would rank, or let's say there's the 3 largest risks, if we summarize them, right? There's a technology risk, in order we can't get there in time to make everything work out. There is a regulation risk. We just don't have the feasible measures in place to make it safety critical. And the third one would be the societal element. how would you rank these three? And then also an open question to the rest. Like, what is the largest threat versus the most attainable?
So, on the regulatory side, I'm talking to EASA and in the UK, CAA, and they want to move fast. Okay, they may not be the organisations used to working at this speed, but I think that's coming. Okay, so I think the regulatory one probably is lower than might imagine. Technology-wise, actually, I agree totally with Thomas. The technology exists now, and I've seen it around this show where 2 years ago, and certainly 4 years ago when Paris was last here, we would never have been talking about liquid hydrogen in aircraft, right? Now I can see 50 different companies that are working on this at some pace, and they've flown aircraft with gaseous hydrogen. Liquid hydrogen is coming. So I think that's not the problem. But this social acceptance of what we're doing today has got to be number one. And it's going to force us to do things differently.
So would you guys agree with that, or what's your take on this?
I think we agree with that a lot. Speaking for Reden, the biggest risk I see, as we're asking for the biggest risks, is that as an aviation industry, which is basically providing travel to the people, travel possibilities, cannot turn around the steering wheel, and we just continue as we did for now, for the wrong reasons. People always are going to travel. Since they have been on the planet, they traveled, and they just developed tools and better tools to travel faster and further. So it's in our DNA. It will never stop. So the big risk is that we just, by the pure fact that we want to travel, and by setting this to the absolute basic need and saying there is no alternative to doing it as we do it now, we just continue polluting and not changing anything. And I believe we have to create that momentum. So we have to start where we can start and set a first step. People will come in. The new generation definitely has a more developed sense for the responsibility we have for the planet. I don't want to make it too big, but I also have children. They also ask me questions. They also want to become pilots, by the way. So this whole sector is going to remain. But everything we can act on, we must act on.
Yeah, I think it's not easy to make a hierarchy between these three, but yeah, for me the societal acceptance is key. I just wanted to add also that we have to take it from a systemic approach. Just wanting to mention, for example, if you have a 5-seater, if you were able to replace the pilot by a fifth passenger, then you cut by 20% the emission of CO2 per passenger also. So, but people have to accept that they will fly in a non-piloted aircraft, or autonomously piloted at least. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that also from a societal acceptance point of view.
Perfect. And maybe something that I would like to, also a little mindful of time, we have another 10 minutes left or so. I wanted to give everyone, or each one of you at the end, a quick couple minutes again to showcase a little bit a key message from you. Before diving into that, I would love to hear your thoughts on a question that's actually quite intriguing to me, which is about geographic balance. I mean, all of us here, we're European players for the most part, right? So what do you think is going to be the role of Europe versus the rest of the world, specifically North America, Asia, or even in South America or Africa? How do you see that play out, and what is your sort of vision or link to the geographic part of that? What is your vision for Europe, and how can they be a leader in this, or what do we need to do to maintain our leadership role?
So I think there are two key factors. One acting to our advantage, which is that with EASA as authority, who has the thumb on whether we fly or not, they're very progressive. And I think they understand the topic really well. They support the industry in moving towards certifying these vehicles, and this can really act to our advantage. However, we talked a lot about social acceptance and so on, and this may be more tricky in Europe than in other places in the world.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's about regulations. We are okay, maybe. About maybe the attitude toward developing new technologies in the sense of startups, in the sense of new companies and pushing new companies to go ahead. Europe maybe is not at the level of some other countries where there are much more, let's say, strengths which push. So I think this is important. So the whole financial aspect to push the technology forward through fast evolving companies has to go ahead. I think we need some strength there, I think.
So I look at the globe through a multinational lens. I'm half Australian, born of a Sri Lankan father, and I'm living in the UK, which is an island that's decided to be outside Europe, not for my liking. And we have an interesting dilemma, right? So battery production, 99% of it is largely driven by China. So whichever way we look at it, Europe is trying to level that balance, and so is the US now with the Inflation Reduction Act. And battery production outside of China is a key enabler for us to think about some of the things that we're talking about today. But one of those things that is interesting, I think, is as we look to renewables, actually Europe probably leads the way and is expanding globally the capability for everything from wind and tidal. Okay, solar is largely coming from China, but this is moving at such a pace. You know, Europe has a big part to play in creating renewables, and that's got to be remembered. The other part we have to play, and I think we've got a handle on it now, but we probably didn't have 10 years ago, is how to get low-cost green hydrogen into the mix. And that is now going to be taken up in North America. And in fact, many companies that were thinking of setting up in Europe are moving to North America. So for aerospace, it's very interesting. I talked to Chevron, and you asked me, what does Chevron do with hydrogen? They're looking at putting hydrogen into every airport already. So in the US. So if we think we're moving fast towards some solutions, America's starting to move even faster. So I think to keep pace with the kind of development and the opportunity and the policy setting, we need to have our politicians better aligned on messaging and money. And it is going to come down to putting a bit of money on the table. None of our technologies will get to certification without it. I'm afraid that's the fact. So we do need some alignment. The good thing we see in the UK is that, I guess with the CAA now impartial to some degree, they've been allowing flights, under special type certificate of gaseous hydrogen aircraft before others. We're seeing faster movement now from the CAA. Perhaps that is a signal that we can go faster if we take complexity away from the governance, not limiting our needs for safety, but going faster at all levels, I think is in government, in regulatory, is really important. Otherwise, we'll lose out to America.
Your question was, what responsibility do we have in Europe? And I believe we have a very high responsibility. We consider ourselves an industrialized continent. And as such, we have, being my personal opinion, a tendency to feel morally superior to pretty much the rest of the world. But at the same time, the industrialized countries leave the biggest negative impact on the planet as well. So we earn the money and we leave the negative impact. So the responsibility of Europe and every single country and every single person is setting the standards and setting the pace and providing the products and providing the change.
Yeah, I can add maybe on the fact that in Europe we are leading. We are well advanced in terms of technologies for future aviation, etc. And it's a very good thing, for example, that to see EASA promoting these new innovations. Still, I think there is a topic of harmonization between FAA and EASA, which is not totally solved today, be it at battery level, for example, certification, at aircraft level for VTOL also, they are taking different approaches. So both authorities are pushing a lot. Maybe the only thing would be to have more harmonization between these two, and after also having leveraging these standards for other countries also to have regulations on these new technologies in their countries.
Thanks for that. I think, and with that, we're also now coming to the final last question. And what I really wanted to do is to give each one of you again for a quick one-liner or a few seconds of a final message to say to your partners, to the regulatory bodies, to whoever you want to young aspiring entrepreneurs out there that might at one point be suppliers of yours or partners of yours. Really, sort of, what is your message to the audience?
So I really want to fly urban air mobility because next time I want to come to Paris Air Show, I don't get totally soaked in the rain. So call to you, please build these kinds of fantastic aircraft. In the meantime, we'll figure out how to automate them safely so they're accessible to everyone so we can get there together more conveniently. Thanks.
Well, I think it's, I agree with you. We obviously have the problem here of mobility, but let's try, I would say, to make this path shared among other companies and try to make, I hope we can make roundtables with different parties, because I see today a lot of developments or independent developments that are not exploiting synergies. And I think if we want to accelerate, as somebody was saying before, we'd better collaborate more and talk more and create synergies. I think this is key aspect for faster development, and it's an advantage to everyone to develop faster.
Yeah, I fully agreed. I mean, we have to act as an ecosystem, and I mean, we are assisting to this maybe the third revolution in aerospace, and it is a really exciting moment, and it's really nice to see that everyone collaborates together. Collaborates, at least everyone is kind of friendly together. Everyone is happy to see the progress everywhere. So I think we should continue in that on that path.
When we talk about sustainability in aviation, it's about emissions, but it's very much about energy consumption and energy efficiency. And the low-hanging fruit in the short term clearly is electrification, and particularly for the short range, not for the long range, for the short range business travel economically that we've all used to come here and also will use to get back again home. And that technologically is available. It's available from the infrastructure perspective, the airports, it's available from the battery perspective, it's available from the aircraft design perspective. So this is what Viridian is going to stand for in the next years as well.
So firstly, I want to say thank you to all the panel, because it's the collaboration starting, right? So it's we all lean in now on a challenge that is that we have to get to net zero by 2050, and it's not without talking like this that we're going to get there. I have spent, I think this is my 15th Paris Air Show, first time wearing a cap, most of the time wearing a suit in the chalets, and this is the best conversation. And I'm sure those people in the chalets aren't talking about what we're talking about, but they should be, because without them and us working together at pace, we're not going to achieve net zero. And sustainable aviation fuels is not going to deliver it. So we have to have the technology accelerated around this room and these conversations, and we need their help. And I'll be calling out, really, if we want to get there, we have to start yesterday. Otherwise, we won't be just wearing an umbrella every time we come. We'll be sinking underwater. The planet is at a tipping point. The icebergs are melting. We cannot stop some of these things, but we can slow them down. And what I'm doing with Fluxart is to try and tackle 66% of all those CO2 emissions in the sky. So come with us on the journey.
What a nice closing words and a duty for us. So thanks again for all of the panelists. I really enjoyed the conversation. Hope you did too. And to the audience, we'll have a networking session, I think starting now in Hall 5. So the other Start Me Up area in a few minutes. Perfect. And maybe let's do one final photo here in front of the screen, I would say. Thanks.